Lira Vale spent her entire life being treated like she was born to suffer. An omega without status. A servant without protection. In the Ironfang pack, wolves like her existed at the bottom of the hierarchy, meant to obey, endure abuse, and disappear quietly when stronger wolves demanded it. But when the ruthless Alpha King accused her of treason and ordered her execution, the pack believed her story was over. They were wrong. Thrown into the Ravine of Hollow Bones and left for dead beneath the mountain, Lira awakened something that should have remained buried forever. Something ancient. Something powerful. A forgotten bloodline feared by kings and erased from history. And when she climbed out of the darkness, she returned as more than a wolf. Now the kingdom that mocked her is about to learn a terrifying truth. The Omega they tried to kill was the one thing their empire was never meant to survive. If this story has already found its grip on you, you are in exactly the right place. Subscribe now and follow every chapter through to its end. Hit that subscribe button. Now let's begin the story. Nobody remembered when the rain had started. By the time the pack gathered in the execution clearing, the storm already owned the mountain. Cold rain hammered the black pines surrounding Ironfang territory. Mud swallowed boots to the ankle. Torches hissed and spat against the downpour while wolves stood in silent rows beneath heavy cloaks stitched with the silver crest of the Ironfang crown. At the center of the clearing knelt a girl everyone believed deserved to die. Lira Vale kept her head lowered as blood slid from the corner of her mouth into the mud beneath her knees. She was 21. Small for a wolf. Thin from years of ration punishment. Her dark hair hung wet across her face while iron cuffs carved into her wrists. To the Ironfang pack, she was an embarrassment. An omega without status. An orphan without allies. A servant born to the lowest bloodline in the territory. And now, a traitor. You stand accused, Elder Mocker announced from beneath the execution platform, his voice carrying through the storm, of conspiring with rogues against the crown of Ironfang. The crowd murmured. Lira closed her eyes. Lie. Every word of it was a lie. But truth had never mattered in Ironfang. Only power. And power belonged to Alpha King Garrick Thorn. Garrick Thorn. He stood above the clearing beneath a black canopy held by royal guards. Massive shoulders. Gray eyes. A scar across his jaw earned during the Northern Border Wars. Everything about him radiated dominance. He did not look at Lira with hatred. Hatred required emotion. He looked at her the way kings looked at problems that needed removing. Beside him stood Commander Valor and the king's elite guard, 12 of the deadliest wolves in the territory. Silver armor. White wolf pelts. Executioners of the crown. Children in Ironfang grew up hearing stories about them. Nobody survived once the elite guard was sent. Nobody. You have final words, Elder Mocker said. Rain struck Lira's face. For several seconds she said nothing. Then she slowly lifted her head. The bruises along her cheekbone had turned dark purple. One eye was swollen nearly shut from the beating she'd received in the dungeon. Still. She smiled. Not because she was fearless. Because she had finally understood something. No matter what she said tonight, they were going to kill her. And if death was already certain, fear became useless. You want final words? She asked quietly. Several wolves frowned. An omega was not supposed to sound calm at her execution. Lira looked directly at the king. You murdered my parents. Silence hit the clearing. Even the rain seemed quieter. Commander Valor stepped forward instantly. Watch your tongue. But Garrick raised one hand. The commander stopped. The king's expression never changed. Your parents died with the rogues beyond the eastern ridge, Garrick said. Another lie. Lira remembered the night clearly. She had been 12. She remembered soldiers dragging her father into the snow. She remembered her mother screaming. She remembered the king's banner outside their home. And she remembered the sound of claws tearing flesh apart while soldiers held her down so she would watch. Ironfang called it justice. Lira called it slaughter. They were innocent, she whispered. Strength determines innocence, Garrick replied. The crowd nodded. That was the Ironfang way. The strong defined morality. The weak survived it. Or didn't. Lira stared at the king for a long moment. Then she laughed. Not loudly. Not wildly. A broken, exhausted laugh that unsettled the wolves around her far more than screaming would have. You know the funny thing, she said. Mocker frowned. Enough. I spent years believing if I worked harder, obeyed better, suffered quietly enough, this pack would finally see me as one of its own. Her voice strengthened. But Ironfang doesn't want loyalty. She looked around the clearing. It wants victims. Several wolves shifted uneasily. Because deep down, they knew she was right. The king finally spoke again. Carry out the sentence. 2 guards approached. Lira lowered her eyes. This was it. No rescue. No miracle. No hidden power awakening at the final second. Just death in the rain. The guards grabbed her arms and dragged her toward the cliffside beyond the clearing. Ironfang executions were simple. No public beheading. No spectacle. Traitors were thrown into the Ravine of Hollow Bones, a massive canyon deep enough that nobody survived the fall. The storm intensified as they reached the edge. Wind screamed through the ravine below like voices trapped beneath the mountain. One guard shoved Lira forward. Her boots slipped on wet stone. She stared down into endless darkness. You should have stayed obedient, one soldier muttered. Lira almost smiled again. Obedient. That word had followed her entire life. Obedient Omega. Obedient servant. Obedient victim. The guard raised his hands. And shoved her. The world vanished beneath her feet. For one terrible second she fell through rain and darkness. Then. Impact. Pain exploded through her body. Stone shattered beneath her ribs. Her shoulder snapped against jagged rock. The breath left her lungs. Above, torchlight disappeared as the storm swallowed the opening of the ravine. Lira tried to move. Agony answered. Something warm spread beneath her back. Blood. A lot of it. She laughed weakly. So this was how it ended. Not glorious. Not meaningful. Just broken bones at the bottom of a grave nobody would visit. Rainwater trickled across the rocks beside her. Her vision blurred. The cold deepened. Death crept closer. And then. Something moved in the darkness. Lira's body froze. A low growl echoed through the ravine. Not wolf. Not human. Something older. Larger. Ancient. 2 golden eyes opened in the darkness beyond the rocks. Watching her. The air changed instantly. Heavy. Predatory. Alive. Lira tried to sit up and failed. The creature stepped closer. Massive paws. Black fur darker than the ravine shadows. Its shoulders stood higher than any wolf she had ever seen. This was no ordinary beast. Every instinct in her body screamed danger. The creature stopped inches away. Its golden eyes locked onto hers. Then something impossible happened. A voice entered her mind. Not dead yet. Lira gasped. What? Not weak either. The beast lowered its enormous head. Ancient scars crossed its muzzle. One ear was torn nearly in half. Its presence felt like standing before the storm itself. Are you real? Lira whispered. The creature's eyes narrowed. I have watched kingdoms rise and rot beneath these mountains. A pulse of energy spread through the ravine. The rocks trembled. Lira stared in disbelief. You're in my head. I am in your blood. Pain suddenly ignited through her chest. Lira screamed. Her veins burned like molten silver. The beast stepped closer. You carry what Ironfang feared. Her heartbeat thundered violently. The storm above roared louder. What are you talking about? The creature's gaze hardened. The last true bloodline. Then the pain became unbearable. Lira arched against the rocks as energy exploded through her body. Bones cracked. Muscles tore. Her scream echoed across the ravine. She felt something inside her awakening. Not the normal wolf every pack member possessed. This was different. Older. Vaster. Wild beyond reason. The beast watched silently. And now they will learn what they tried to bury. Lira's eyes flashed gold. The entire ravine shook. Above the canyon, wolves in the execution clearing suddenly froze. Commander Valor turned sharply toward the ravine edge. Did you feel that? A deep vibration rolled through the mountain. Several soldiers backed away nervously. Then, a howl erupted from below. Not a normal howl. This sound carried through the storm like a living force. Ancient. Monstrous. Every wolf in the clearing felt terror slam into their instincts. Even the king's elite guard went still. Garrick's expression changed for the first time that night. Not fear. Recognition. No, he whispered. The howl came again. Closer now. Something massive moved within the ravine darkness. The mountain trembled beneath their feet. And far below, Lira Vale opened her eyes. Gold burned inside them like fire. The girl Ironfang had thrown away was gone. Something else had awakened in her place. Something the old stories once warned about. The first wolf. Chapter 2. The wolf beneath the mountain. The howl did not end quickly. It rolled through the ravine like thunder trapped beneath the earth, rising higher and deeper until every wolf standing above the canyon felt it inside their bones. Not heard. Felt. The storm itself seemed to recoil. Rain twisted sideways through the mountain wind while distant trees bent violently against an invisible pressure spreading outward from the ravine below. Silence consumed the execution clearing after the howl faded. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. Then one of the younger soldiers whispered the thought none of them wanted to say aloud. That sounded ancient. Commander Valor rounded on him instantly. Silence. But even Valor's voice lacked its usual certainty. Because he had felt it too. All of them had. That howl carried authority. Not ordinary dominance. Not alpha pressure. Something older than pack hierarchy itself. At the edge of the clearing, Alpha King Garrick Thorn stared into the darkness below the cliff. Rain streamed down his face. His expression had become unreadable. But his hand, his right hand, had slowly curled into a fist. Elder Mocker noticed immediately. You know what that was, the elder murmured. Garrick did not answer. The old man's eyes widened slightly. Then understanding, and fear, crossed his features. That's impossible. The king finally spoke. Seal the ravine. Several guards hesitated. Valor frowned. Your Majesty. I said seal it. The command cracked across the clearing. The elite guard immediately moved into action while soldiers rushed toward supply wagons positioned near the forest edge. But unease spread rapidly through the crowd. Because Ironfang wolves knew legends. Every child raised in the Northern Territories knew them. Stories about the first wolves. The original bloodlines born before modern packs existed. Creatures powerful enough to tear through armies. Beasts capable of forcing entire territories to kneel. Most believed the stories were myths. Fairy tales meant to frighten pups into obedience. Yet moments ago, something below the mountain had sounded very real. Valor stepped beside the king. You think the Omega survived? No. The answer came instantly. But Garrick's gaze never left the ravine. Then what are we dealing with? For several seconds only Rain answered. Then the king spoke quietly. A mistake that should have stayed buried. Far below the mountain, Lira Vale collapsed against wet stone while pain tore through every part of her body. She could not breathe properly. Her bones felt molten. Her heartbeat slammed wildly against her ribs. The transformation was wrong. Too violent. Too large. Every wolf shifted for the first time during adolescence. But this felt like her body was being remade from the inside out. She clawed at the ground as another wave of agony hit. What's happening to me? The enormous black wolf stood nearby, unmoving. Its golden eyes glowed through the darkness. Your blood remembers. Lira screamed as her spine arched violently. Bones cracked beneath her skin. She heard it. Felt it. Her fingers lengthened. Claws pushed through her nails. Silver gold energy pulsed beneath her veins. No, make it stop. It cannot stop. The beast stepped closer. It has awakened. Lyra's vision blurred. Her senses exploded outward suddenly. She could smell rainwater dripping hundreds of feet above. Could hear soldiers moving near the ravine edge. Could detect heartbeats. Individual heartbeats. The realization horrified her. What are you? The ancient wolf lowered its head. The last of what your kind once feared becoming. Another surge of pain ripped through her body. Fur spread along her arms. Her teeth sharpened. The world tilted violently. Lira barely recognized her own voice anymore. I'm dying. The creature's eyes narrowed. No. Its voice deepened like distant thunder. You are becoming. The transformation reached its peak. Lyra's scream became a howl. Energy erupted outward from her body in a shockwave powerful enough to crack the surrounding stone walls. Rocks shattered across the ravine floor. The mountain trembled. Then, silence. Lira collapsed against the ground, gasping. Everything hurt. But the agony had changed. Stabilized. Slowly, she lifted trembling hands before her face. Claws. Not fully wolf. Not human either. Something between. Her breathing quickened. What did you do to me? The beast stared at her. I only awakened what already existed. Lira tried to stand. This time she succeeded. Barely. Her body felt stronger despite the pain. Sharper. Alive in a way she had never experienced before. Even the darkness no longer hid the ravine from her eyes. She could see perfectly. The ancient wolf turned away and began walking deeper into the canyon. Lira frowned. Wait. The beast did not stop. Where are you going? To show you the truth. Despite every instinct warning her against following, Lira stepped after it. The deeper they traveled, the stranger the ravine became. Old carvings appeared along the stone walls. Massive symbols worn by time. Wolf markings unlike anything used by modern packs. Some glowed faintly beneath the darkness. Lira touched one carefully. The symbol pulsed beneath her fingers. Then images slammed into her mind. Fire. War. Gigantic wolves racing across battlefields. Ancient kings kneeling before creatures with glowing golden eyes. Lira staggered backward, gasping. What was that? Memory. The beast continued forward. The mountain remembers its first rulers. Her pulse quickened. This place, what is it? The wolf stopped before an enormous stone doorway hidden within the ravine wall. Origin. The doorway stood at least 30 feet high. Ancient claw marks covered its surface. Lira stared in awe. No one knows this exists. The Ironfang kings ensured that. The beast pressed one massive paw against the stone. Golden light spread across the carvings. Then the doors slowly opened. Cold air rushed outward. Lira hesitated before stepping inside. The chamber beyond was enormous. Ancient. A forgotten throne room carved directly into the mountain itself. Massive pillars lined the hall, each engraved with wolves unlike any she had seen before. At the center stood a black stone throne. And behind it, a symbol burned into the wall. A wolf with glowing eyes surrounded by a silver crown. The moment Lira saw it, her chest tightened painfully. The beast turned toward her. "You know this symbol." She did. Impossible as it sounded. She did. "I've seen it before." Images surfaced from memory. Her mother wearing a necklace hidden beneath her clothes. A silver wolf crest. The same symbol. Lira's eyes widened. "My parents." The beast nodded slowly. They were descendants of the first bloodline. The room suddenly felt colder. "That's impossible." "Not impossible." The wolf stepped closer. "Hidden." Lira shook her head. "No, if that were true, why hide us?" The beast's gaze darkened. "Because your blood once ruled every northern territory." The silence afterward felt enormous. Lira stared at the throne behind the creature. "You're saying my family were kings?" "Not kings." The wolf's eyes glowed brighter. "Wolves." Confusion crossed her face. "What's the difference?" The ancient beast looked toward the chamber ceiling. "And that question is why your kind fell." Far above the ravine, Ironfang soldiers worked frantically to collapse the canyon entrance. Large chains dragged sharpened logs toward the edge while stonebreakers prepared explosive powder barrels. Commander Valor supervised personally. "Move faster." The soldiers obeyed immediately. Fear motivated them better than discipline tonight. Nobody wanted to remain near the ravine longer than necessary. One guard approached Valor nervously. "Commander." "What?" "The men are talking." "Then silence them." The guard swallowed hard. "They think the stories are true." Valor's expression hardened. "There are no first wolves." But even as he said it, the mountain trembled again. A deep rumble echoed upward from below. Several soldiers stumbled. One dropped his torch entirely. Then came another howl. Closer now. Much closer. The sound tore through the storm with terrifying force. Horses panicked instantly. Men backed away from the ravine edge. Valor drew his sword. "Hold position." But fear was spreading rapidly. Because instinct, the oldest law wolves possessed, was screaming at them to run. Inside the hidden chamber, Lira stood frozen as the ancient beast approached the throne. Its massive form moved with silent authority. "You still haven't told me what you are." The creature stopped beside the black throne. Slowly, it shifted. Lira's eyes widened. Bones cracked softly. The enormous wolf form began changing shape. Dark fur receded. Massive limbs reshaped themselves. And standing before her moments later was a man. Tall. Broad-shouldered. Long black hair streaked with silver. Ancient scars crossed his bare chest and arms. His golden eyes remained unchanged. Lira stumbled backward. "What?" The man regarded her calmly. "I was called Fenrir once." "Fenrir." Her pulse hammered. "You're human?" A faint smile crossed his face. "No." The answer carried terrifying certainty. "I merely learned how to wear this shape." Lira stared at him in disbelief. "That's impossible." "For your kind, perhaps. He stepped toward the throne. But not for mine. Everything about him radiated power. Not loud dominance like modern alphas. This felt deeper. Natural. Ancient. The air itself seemed to bend around him. Lira forced herself to speak. You said my bloodline ruled the north. Fenrir nodded once. Before packs existed, there were the first wolves. He placed one hand against the throne. We were not divided into alphas, betas, and omegas. Lira frowned. That's impossible. Wolves always had ranks. No. His voice sharpened. Modern packs created ranks to control weakness through fear. The words hit harder than she expected. All wolves were born different, he continued. But difference was never meant to determine worth. Lira looked down silently. Her entire life had been defined by Omega status. Punished for it. Humiliated for it. Broken by it. Fenrir watched her carefully. The first kings of Ironfang feared your bloodline because it threatened their system. So they killed us. Yes. The answer came without hesitation. Over generations they hunted every surviving descendant. Lira's throat tightened. My parents knew. They did. Then why didn't they tell me? Fenrir's expression darkened slightly. Because knowledge would have killed you sooner. Anger flickered through her chest. They died anyway. They chose your survival over revenge. Silence filled the chamber. Lira turned away. She remembered her mother's hands. Her father's voice. The way they always looked over their shoulders. Fear. They had lived afraid every day. Because Ironfang had been hunting them all along. A deep rage stirred inside her. Not explosive. Not wild. Cold. Sharp. The kind of anger that settles into bone. They threw me away like I was nothing. Fenrir studied her carefully. And now? Lira slowly lifted her gaze. Gold flickered faintly within her eyes again. Now they're going to regret missing. Far above, Commander Valor sensed movement near the ravine edge. Too fast. Too quiet. He spun toward the darkness. Who's there? Nothing answered. Rain hammered the cliffs. Soldiers tightened their grips on weapons. Then. One scream split the night. A guard vanished from the edge so suddenly nobody even saw what grabbed him. The sound of tearing flesh echoed upward. Panic erupted instantly. What was that? Something's down there. Another blur exploded from the darkness. A second soldier disappeared. Blood sprayed across the rocks. The remaining wolves backed away in terror. Valor roared, "Form up." The elite guard moved immediately into defensive formation. Silver blades unsheathed. Eyes scanning the storm. Then the darkness moved again. Fast. Massive. Monstrous. A shape landed briefly atop a stone outcrop above the ravine. Golden eyes burned through the rain. Several soldiers froze in horror. Because the creature standing there was a wolf. But far too large to be natural. And its eyes were human. Then it vanished again into the storm. One terrified guard whispered. The Omega. Nobody slept in Ironfang territory after the second howl. Fear moved faster than rumor. By dawn, the entire mountain knew something had returned from the Ravine of Hollow Bones. Something large enough to drag armed wolves into darkness without leaving bodies behind. The stories spread differently depending on who told them. Some claimed a rogue beast had awakened beneath the mountain. Others swore the spirit of an ancient king now haunted the ravine. But the oldest wolves, the ones old enough to remember forbidden whispers from previous generations, said a far more dangerous word. First blood. And inside the royal fortress of Ironfang, Alpha King Garrick Thorne listened to the panic growing beyond his walls. The throne room stood silent except for rain striking the tall stone windows. Commander Valar knelt before the king while several members of the elite guard remained positioned behind him. None looked comfortable. One of the guards still carried blood across his silver armor from the previous night. Blood that did not belong to him. "We lost 4 men," Valar said grimly. Garrick remained seated on the black throne. And the creature? No clear visual confirmation. The king's gaze hardened. "You saw it." Valar hesitated. That alone was unusual. The commander of the elite guard was not a wolf easily shaken. But what he had glimpsed near the ravine clearly disturbed him. It resembled a wolf, Valar admitted carefully. But larger than any living creature I've encountered. One guard spoke quietly behind him. "It moved like it was hunting." Another muttered. "No wolf moves that fast." Garrick finally rose from the throne. Instant silence followed. The king descended the steps slowly, black cloak dragging across the stone floor. "You will not speak of legends," he said coldly. Nobody answered. Because nobody dared. But silence could not erase what instinct already knew. The king stopped before Valar. "Take the elite guard." Valar looked up immediately. "Your Majesty." "Track it." Several guards exchanged uneasy glances. Valar himself frowned. "With respect, if this truly is connected to the old bloodlines, then kill it before the territory learns the truth." The room became deathly still. Truth. Not rumor. Not myth. Truth. Valar's expression darkened. "So it's real." Garrick stared at him for several seconds. Then spoke the words he had spent decades burying. The first bloodline survived. The air seemed to vanish from the room. One guard actually stepped backward. "No." Garrick's voice sharpened like steel. "Listen carefully. If fear spreads beyond Ironfang, neighboring packs will turn against us overnight." He looked toward the storm beyond the windows. Every throne in the north was built on the extinction of that bloodline. Valar slowly stood. "And the Omega?" The king's eyes became ice. "She cannot be allowed to live." Far beneath the mountain, Lira Vale stood at the center of the ancient chamber while torchfire flickered across the black stone walls. Hours had passed since Fenrir revealed the truth. Yet her mind still struggled to absorb it. Everything she believed about the world had been a lie. Packs. Ranks. Omegas. Alphas. Ironfang had built its power on rules never meant to exist. And somehow, she was connected to the bloodline they feared most. Lira stared at the silver symbol carved behind the throne. "I still don't understand why they're afraid." Fenrir stood near one of the ancient pillars. Massive even in human form. "Because fear built their kingdoms." "That doesn't answer my question." His golden eyes shifted toward her. "The first wolves could not be controlled." The words lingered heavily in the chamber. Lira folded her arms tightly. "Neither can rogues." Fenrir shook his head once. "Rogues reject law." He stepped closer. "The first bloodline existed before law." A cold sensation crawled down her spine. "What exactly were we?" Fenrir studied her silently before answering. "Predators." Not the answer she expected. "You make us sound like monsters." A faint shadow crossed his expression. "We were." Silence filled the chamber. Lira stared at him carefully now. For the first time, she noticed something beneath his calm demeanor. Regret. Ancient regret. "You said were." Fenrir looked away. "The first wolves united territories through strength." His voice deepened slightly. "But strength without restraint becomes tyranny eventually." Lira frowned. "So the packs rebelled?" "No." His eyes darkened. "They betrayed." Images flashed briefly through Lyra's mind again. War. Burning cities. Silver weapons. First wolves being slaughtered. The kings feared losing power, Fenrir continued. So they rewrote history. And hunted us. Yes. Lyra looked down at her hands. The claws still emerged when emotion spiked too sharply. Part of her remained terrified by what she was becoming. But another part. A darker part. Felt alive for the first time. Why me? She asked quietly. Fenrir answered immediately. Because blood remembers. Before she could reply, her senses suddenly sharpened. Movement. Above. Many wolves approaching the ravine. Lyra straightened instantly. They're coming. Fenrir nodded slowly. They tracked you faster than expected. Her pulse quickened. How many? The ancient wolf closed his eyes briefly. 12. Lyra froze. The elite guard. Of course. Garrick would never send ordinary soldiers after her now. A flicker of fear moved through her chest. Commander Valor alone had killed dozens of rogue wolves during the northern campaigns. The elite guard were living weapons. Fenrir watched her carefully. You fear them. I know them. Good. Lyra frowned. That's your advice? The corner of his mouth lifted slightly. Never underestimate prey that learned how to hunt. Anger flashed through her instantly. I'm not prey anymore. Fenrir stepped closer. His presence alone filled the chamber with pressure. No, he agreed quietly. That is exactly why they fear you. Above the ravine, 12 armored wolves moved silently through the storm. The elite guard of Ironfang. Every member chosen personally by Garrick Thorne. Every member trained for war. Silver armor glimmered beneath torchlight as Commander Valor studied the canyon entrance. The mountain felt wrong tonight. Too quiet. Too aware. He signaled 2 guards forward. Check the lower ridge. The wolves obeyed immediately. Nobody complained. But Valor could smell tension spreading through the unit. Fear sweat. Even elite soldiers were still wolves underneath. And instinct did not lie. Something dangerous lived below. A younger guard named Sarek approached carefully. You really think it's the Omega? Valor tightened his grip on his sword. I think she should have died in that fall. That's not what I asked. The commander's eyes narrowed. Sarek swallowed hard but continued. The men are talking. They think she changed. Valor looked toward the ravine. Rain hammered the cliffs around them. Every wolf changes eventually. No, Sarek whispered. I mean changed. Before Valor could respond, a howl echoed through the canyon. Closer than before. Every member of the elite guard immediately shifted into combat stance. The sound reverberated through the mountain like a warning. Then silence returned. Valor raised one hand. Move. The 12 guards descended carefully into the ravine. Torches illuminated wet stone walls as they moved deeper beneath the mountain. None realized they were already being watched. Far above them, hidden among the cliffs, Lyra crouched silently against the darkness. Her senses tracked every heartbeat below. Every breath. Every movement. It terrified her how easily she could hear them. Smell them. Hunt them. Fenrir appeared beside her soundlessly. They came to kill you. Lyra's golden eyes remained fixed on the descending guards. They always do. Valor moved cautiously through the ravine floor while the squad spread outward in formation. Torchlight flickered across ancient carvings none of them understood. One guard muttered nervously. These symbols weren't here before. They were, Valor replied. You simply couldn't see them. The younger wolves exchanged uneasy glances. Then one stopped abruptly. There's blood. The squad froze. Fresh blood stained the rocks ahead. Valor crouched carefully beside it. Still warm. His instincts screamed danger instantly. Defensive positions. The guards formed a circle immediately. Too late. The first attack came from above. A massive dark shape exploded from the cliffside and slammed into one of the soldiers hard enough to shatter stone beneath him. The guard screamed once before claws tore through his throat. Blood sprayed across the ravine wall. Chaos erupted. Contact. The creature vanished before blades reached it. Too fast. Far too fast. Torchlight swung wildly through darkness. Then another guard disappeared screaming into the shadows. Something enormous dragged him upward into the cliffs. Bones cracked. Silence followed. Panic spread instantly. What is that thing? Valor's eyes scanned the darkness. Hold formation. But fear was already fracturing discipline. A blur streaked across the ravine again. Silver armor exploded apart as another guard was thrown violently into the canyon wall. Dead before he hit the ground. The remaining wolves backed together desperately. Then she stepped into the torchlight. Lira Vale emerged from the darkness slowly. Blood covered one side of her face. Long claws extended from her hands. Golden eyes burned against the storm. Several guards froze in horror. Because despite the monstrous aura surrounding her, they recognized her. The Omega. Lira tilted her head slightly. No, she said quietly. Her voice sounded deeper now. Sharper. You lost the right to call me that. One terrified guard lunged first out of panic. Huge mistake. Lira moved instantly. Faster than thought. She caught his sword arm mid-strike and shattered it with one brutal twist. The scream barely escaped before she drove claws through his chest. The guard collapsed dead at her feet. The remaining soldiers staggered backward. Valor stared at her in disbelief. Impossible. This was the same girl they had beaten, chained, and thrown into the ravine. But the weakness was gone. Something ancient stared through her eyes now. You should have stayed dead, Valor growled. Lira smiled faintly. You first. Then she attacked. The ravine became slaughter. Lira tore through the elite guard like a storm unleashed from beneath the mountain. Not wild. Not mindless. Precise. Terrifyingly precise. She moved between blades effortlessly while claws ripped through silver armor that should have resisted ordinary wolves. One guard shifted fully into wolf form and charged her. Lira caught him by the throat one-handed and hurled him into another soldier hard enough to break both bodies apart against the rocks. Valor roared and lunged personally. Unlike the others, he was fast enough to match her briefly. Steel clashed against claws. Sparks exploded. The commander drove her backward with brutal strength. You're still weak, he snarled. Lira blocked another strike. No, she hissed. Now I'm angry. Golden energy erupted through her veins. She slammed Valor hard enough to crack his armor. The commander staggered backward in shock. She was stronger than an alpha. Much stronger. Fear finally entered his eyes. Around them, the remaining elite guard were dying. One by one. The hunt had reversed. And they knew it. Sarek turned and ran. Lira's gaze snapped toward him instantly. The young guard barely reached the ravine slope before something massive landed in front of him. Fenrir. In wolf form. Towering. Ancient. Sarek froze completely. The first wolf stared down at him. Then slowly opened its jaws. The scream echoed across the canyon. Valor heard it. And understood. This was no rogue attack. No accident. Ironfang had awakened something their kingdom was never meant to survive. He looked toward Lira again. Rain poured across her blood-stained face while golden eyes locked onto his. "You hunted my family," she said quietly. The remaining guards backed away in terror. "You hunted me." Valor tightened his grip on his broken sword. "You think this changes anything?" Lira stepped forward slowly. "It changes everything." Then she ripped through the last of the king's elite guard. Dawn rose red over Ironfang Mountain. Not from sunlight. From fire. Smoke climbed into the sky in massive black columns while alarm bells rang across the fortress walls. Wolves rushed through the stronghold in growing panic as terrified messengers spread news no kingdom was prepared to hear. The elite guard was dead. All 12. Destroyed in the Ravine of Hollow Bones. Some bodies had been recovered. Others had not. But the message left behind was unmistakable. Ironfang was no longer hunting the Omega. The Omega was hunting Ironfang. Inside the royal war chamber, fear spread faster than strategy. Commanders argued across the massive stone table while servants hurried between them carrying maps, casualty reports, and orders changing by the minute. She wiped out the elite guard alone? That's impossible. We should evacuate the lower districts. And tell the territory their king fears one Omega? The room erupted again. At the head of the chamber stood Alpha King Garrick Thorn. Silent. Still. Deadly calm. That calm frightened them more than shouting would have. Commander Valor's shattered sword rested on the table before him. Recovered from the ravine. Covered in blood. Valor himself had survived, but barely. He now lay unconscious in the fortress infirmary with broken ribs, a crushed shoulder, and claw wounds that healers could not explain. The king studied the broken blade without speaking. Then finally. Seal the mountain passes. The chamber quieted immediately. One general frowned. Your Majesty, that would trap civilians inside the territory. Garrick lifted his eyes slowly. And? Nobody spoke again. Because they understood. This was no longer about protecting the people. This was survival. Ironfang had gone to war. Far beneath the mountain, Lira Vale stood beside an underground river while blood washed slowly from her hands. The water carried crimson downstream into darkness. She stared at it silently. The killings should have horrified her. Instead, she felt calm. That frightened her more than anything else. Fenrir watched from nearby without interrupting her thoughts. The ancient wolf understood what transformation truly cost. Not the body. The soul. You hesitate, he finally said. Lira did not look at him. I killed 12 wolves. 12 soldiers. They were still people. Fenrir's golden eyes narrowed slightly. They came to butcher you. I know. Then why grieve them? The question lingered heavily. Lira stared into the rushing water. Because part of her still remembered their faces. The same guards who mocked her in the fortress halls. The same wolves who laughed when servants threw food at her feet instead of handing it to her. The same warriors who watched silently when she was beaten. But they had also eaten beside each other. Worked beside each other. Lived in the same territory. And now they were dead because of her. Fenrir approached slowly. This is why your bloodline fell. Lira looked up. You think mercy is weakness? No. The ancient wolf's voice deepened. I think mercy becomes weakness when offered to wolves who mistake kindness for surrender. Silence returned. Then Fenrir turned toward the distant tunnels leading upward. The king will come personally now. Lyra's eyes sharpened. You sound certain. I knew Garrick's father. That caught her attention instantly. Fenrir's expression darkened slightly. The Thorn bloodline always answers fear with violence. Lira flexed her claws slowly. Good. Golden light flickered briefly beneath her skin. Let him come. Above the mountain, Ironfang Fortress prepared for siege. Massive iron gates slammed shut. Archers lined the walls. Silver weapons were distributed throughout the stronghold. Even civilians were armed. Fear had transformed the kingdom overnight. And everywhere, the whispers spread. First blood. Some called Lira a demon. Others called her vengeance. But among the lowest-ranked wolves, the servants, laborers, and omegas forced into obedience, something dangerous had begun awakening. Hope. A kitchen servant whispered to another while distributing supplies near the lower courtyard. They say she tore through the elite guard without shifting fully. Another servant glanced around nervously. Keep your voice down. But what if it's true? The first servant lowered her voice further. What if someone finally fights back? Nearby guards barked orders, forcing the servants apart before the conversation could continue. But the idea had already spread. And ideas were harder to kill than wolves. Inside the royal infirmary, Commander Valor awoke screaming. He shot upright violently before collapsing back against the bed in agony. Healers rushed toward him instantly. Commander. Where is the king? The healers hesitated. Then Garrick himself entered the chamber. The room immediately emptied except for the two wolves. Valor's breathing remained uneven. For the first time in years. He looked afraid. Garrick stood beside the bed silently. Well? Valor swallowed hard. It's her. I know. No, Valor whispered. You don't. The king's gaze hardened slightly. I watched her kill armored wolves with her bare hands. He gripped the bed tightly. She moved faster than alpha instinct. Valor looked toward the storm outside the window. And the other one. The king became still. You saw it clearly? Valor nodded slowly. A first wolf. The words settled like poison in the room. Garrick closed his eyes briefly. For a moment, he looked older. Not physically. Spiritually. Like a man staring at consequences he had spent decades outrunning. We should abandon the fortress, Valor said quietly. The king's eyes opened instantly. No. She's coming here. Good. Valor stared at him. You still think you can win? Garrick stepped closer. I don't need to win. The king's voice became cold enough to freeze blood. I only need her dead. Far below, Lira climbed the ancient staircase leading upward through the mountain. The tunnels narrowed gradually until cold wind began slipping through cracks in the stone. Surface air. She was close. Fenrir followed several steps behind her. You intend to walk directly into Ironfang? Lira kept climbing. Yes. They outnumber you. They always have. Fenrir studied her carefully. And yet you no longer fear them. Lira stopped briefly. Her golden eyes reflected faintly against the tunnel walls. I spent my entire life afraid. Images flashed through her mind. Being beaten for speaking out of turn. Forced to bow her head while alphas insulted her. Watching wolves stronger than her abuse anyone too weak to resist. Fear had shaped every part of her existence. Until the ravine changed her. Now. Something else lived where fear used to be. Rage. Purpose. Hunger. I'm done kneeling, she said quietly. Fenrir's expression remained unreadable. But there was approval in his eyes. The tunnel exit opened behind a waterfall overlooking Ironfang Fortress. Lira stepped into the morning mist slowly. And froze. The fortress stretched across the mountainside like a kingdom preparing for war. Smoke rose from massive forge fires. Soldiers filled the walls. Archers scanned the forests below. Ironfang knew she was coming. Good. Lira stared at the black castle towers towering above the mountain. Her home. Her prison. The place where her parents died. The place where they tried to bury her. Fenrir stopped beside her. You could leave. She glanced at him. The north is vast. Other territories exist. Lira looked back toward the fortress. And they'll keep hunting me forever. Yes. She smiled faintly. Then I should probably become something worth fearing. Before Fenrir could answer, a horn sounded across the valley. One of the wall guards had spotted movement near the waterfall. Shouts erupted instantly. Contact. Lower ridge. Archers rushed into formation. Lira stepped calmly from the mist. The soldiers on the walls froze. Because they recognized her immediately. The Omega. Alive. Walking openly toward the fortress gates. And beside her, the enormous black wolf. Panic exploded across the battlements. First wolf. Hold the line. Get the king. Arrows launched. Dozens of them. Lira didn't move. Fenrir stepped forward once. A pulse of invisible force erupted outward from his body. Every arrow shattered midair. The silence afterward felt enormous. Terror spread visibly across the walls now. Lira continued walking toward the gates. Slow. Steady. Certain. Like death arriving exactly where it intended to be. Inside the fortress, Garrick Thorne stood at the highest tower balcony overlooking the approaching figures below. His face remained expressionless. But his eyes burned with hatred. Beside him stood several remaining commanders. One whispered shakily. What do we do? Garrick answered instantly. Open the gates. Every wolf on the balcony stared at him in disbelief. Your Majesty. I said open them. Far below, the massive fortress gates groaned open slowly. Lira stopped walking. The soldiers lining the walls watched nervously as Alpha King Garrick Thorne emerged alone from the fortress entrance. Black armor. Wolfskin cloak. Sword hanging at his side. Even now. He looked powerful. Unshaken. The ruler of Ironfang descended the stone staircase toward her without escort. Fenrir watched carefully but did not interfere. This confrontation belonged to Lira. Rain began falling again as Garrick stopped several yards away from her. For a long moment. Neither spoke. The king studied her carefully. You survived. Lira's expression remained cold. You sound disappointed. You should be dead. You tried your best. Several soldiers watching from the walls exchanged nervous glances. Nobody had ever spoken to Garrick Thorne like this and lived. But Lira no longer sounded like an Omega begging for mercy. She sounded dangerous. The king noticed it too. His gaze shifted briefly to her glowing eyes. The bloodline awakened fully. Yes. Garrick's jaw tightened slightly. So your parents finally succeeded. Lira's pulse quickened instantly. You knew. I knew exactly what they were. Rage flickered beneath her skin. You murdered them anyway. The king's expression hardened. I protected this territory. You slaughtered innocents. I prevented war. Lira laughed bitterly. That's the lie tyrants always tell themselves. The soldiers on the walls stood utterly silent now. Listening. Watching. Because this conversation was tearing open truths Ironfang buried generations ago. Garrick stepped closer. You think power makes you righteous? Lira's claws slowly extended. No. Her voice lowered dangerously. But it finally makes me impossible to ignore. The king drew his sword. Black steel gleamed beneath the rain. Around the fortress, every wolf held their breath. Garrick pointed the blade toward her. You could have remained forgotten. Lira's golden eyes burned brighter. And you could have let me live. Then the king attacked. He moved with terrifying speed for a wolf his age. The black blade slashed toward her throat instantly. Lira caught it bare-handed. Steel screamed against her claws. Shock crossed Garrick's face for the first time. She shoved the blade aside violently and struck him across the chest. The king staggered backward as his armor cracked. Gasps erupted from the walls. No one had ever seen Garrick Thorne driven backward in combat. Not once. The king recovered instantly and lunged again. This time the duel exploded into full violence. Stone shattered beneath their feet. Steel clashed against claws. Rain spiraled around them while wolves watched their king battle the monster he created. But slowly. Terribly. The truth became obvious. Garrick was losing. Lira moved faster. Hit harder. Every strike drove the king backward another step toward the fortress gates. Fear spread through the watching soldiers. Because if Garrick fell, Ironfang fell with him. The king realized it too. And desperation finally entered his eyes. Rain drowned Ironfang fortress beneath a sky black as ash. The storm had grown monstrous by nightfall. Lightning ripped across the mountains while thunder shook the ancient walls of the kingdom that once believed itself untouchable. Now fear lived inside those walls. Fear in the soldiers gripping silver spears with trembling hands. Fear in the servants hiding behind barred doors. Fear in the commanders watching their king bleed across the fortress courtyard. And at the center of it all stood Lira Vale. The Omega they tried to bury. The wolf they could no longer stop. Garrick Thorne staggered backward across shattered stone while blood ran from the corner of his mouth. The courtyard around them looked like a battlefield already. Broken pillars. Destroyed banners. Dead guards. The king tightened his grip on his sword as rain streamed down his face. For the first time in decades, Ironfang's ruler looked mortal. Lira advanced slowly toward him. Her claws glimmered silver gold beneath the lightning flashes. "You're weaker than I expected," she said quietly. Garrick's eyes burned with fury. "You know nothing about strength." Lira tilted her head slightly. "No." Her voice sharpened. "I know exactly what your kind mistakes for strength." The king roared and attacked again. But rage had replaced precision now. His strikes came heavier. Sloppier. Fear hid beneath them. Lira avoided the first slash easily. Blocked the second. Then drove her fist into Garrick's ribs hard enough to send him crashing through a stone archway. The fortress shook. Gasps erupted from the watching soldiers above. No king of Ironfang had ever suffered humiliation like this. Garrick rose slowly from the rubble. Breathing harder now. His armor was cracked nearly beyond use. Still. Hatred kept him standing. "You think killing me changes the world," he snarled. Lira stepped through the broken arch after him. "It changes yours." The king lunged again. Their clash exploded through the fortress halls. Stone walls cracked. Ancient statues shattered. The duel moved deeper into the castle while terrified wolves fled from the destruction in their path. Outside the fortress gates, Fenrir watched silently beneath the storm. The massive first wolf stood like a shadow against the mountain while Ironfang's soldiers kept their distance. None dared attack him. Not anymore. Because instinct understood what their minds struggled to accept. This was not a creature they could defeat. A young soldier stood trembling near the wall stairs, unable to look away from the battle inside the fortress. "She's winning," he whispered. Another wolf answered shakily. "No one defeats Garrick Thorne." But even as he spoke, a thunderous crash echoed from inside the castle. Then part of the upper tower collapsed outward into the storm. The soldiers flinched collectively. Because they all understood now. Their king was losing. Inside the fortress, Lira slammed Garrick across the throne room hard enough to crack one of the massive pillars supporting the ceiling. The king crashed against the black stone steps leading toward his throne. Blood covered his face now. His breathing had become ragged. Lira walked toward him slowly. Every step echoed across the chamber. The throne room looked different tonight. Smaller. Less powerful. The same room where she once stood trembling with lowered eyes now felt like a tomb waiting to close. Garrick forced himself upright. You should have stayed weak. Lira stared at him coldly. You built your kingdom around that word. Lightning flashed through the massive windows behind her. For years you called wolves weak simply because they couldn't fight back. The king wiped blood from his mouth. That is the natural order. No, Lira replied. That's the order men like you created. Silence filled the throne room briefly. Then Garrick laughed. A harsh, exhausted sound. You think you're different from me? Lyra's eyes narrowed. You killed soldiers tonight. Guards. Wolves following orders. His smile widened darkly. You think power won't change you the same way it changed every ruler before you? The words hit harder than she expected. Because part of her had already begun wondering the same thing. She remembered the calm she felt while killing the elite guard. Remembered how natural violence suddenly seemed. That frightened her. Garrick saw the hesitation instantly. And smiled wider. There it is. He slowly rose again despite the pain. The truth. His voice echoed through the throne room. You are becoming exactly what we feared. Lyra's claws tightened. I'm becoming what you created. The king charged her again with a roar. This time the battle became brutal. Savage. No restraint remained between them. Garrick shifted partially into wolf form mid-attack, muscles expanding violently as claws erupted from his hands. He slammed into Lira hard enough to drive both of them through the throne room doors. The massive wooden gates exploded apart. They crashed into the outer balcony overlooking the mountain cliffs. Rain hammered them instantly. Wind screamed across the fortress heights. Below, the wolves of Ironfang watched in horror as their king battled the awakened first blood at the edge of the mountain itself. Garrick attacked relentlessly now. Claws. Teeth. Pure alpha brutality. For several seconds he actually forced Lira backward. The old king still possessed terrifying strength. But not enough. Lira caught his next strike and twisted violently. Bones cracked. Garrick roared in pain as one arm broke instantly. Before he could recover, Lira drove him to his knees. The entire fortress went silent. The Alpha King of Ironfang knelt before the Omega he condemned to death. Rain poured over both of them while thunder rolled above the mountain. Garrick looked up at her with hatred burning in his eyes. Do it. Lira stared down at him. One strike. That was all it would take. After everything he had done. After her parents. After the executions. After the years of humiliation and cruelty. He deserved death. The wolf inside her wanted it badly. She could feel it. That ancient hunger. End him. End the king. End Ironfang. Her claws slowly lifted. Below the balcony, the soldiers watched in frozen silence. Waiting. Then. A memory surfaced unexpectedly. Her mother's voice. Not afraid. Not angry. Soft. They will try to teach you that cruelty is strength. Lyra's breathing slowed. But cruelty only creates more cruelty. The memory hit her like cold water. For the first time since the ravine. The rage inside her hesitated. Garrick noticed immediately. And laughed weakly. You can't do it. Lyra's eyes sharpened. You think mercy makes me weak? I think mercy makes rulers vulnerable. The storm raged around them. And suddenly Lira understood something terrifying. If she killed him now, fear would crown her exactly the same way it crowned him. The kingdom would not change. It would merely kneel before a different monster. Slowly, Lira lowered her claws. Shock spread across the watching wolves below. Even Garrick stared at her in disbelief. "You don't deserve mercy," she said quietly. The king's eyes narrowed. "Then why spare me?" Lira stepped back. "Because I refuse to become you." Silence consumed the fortress. Then Lira turned toward the soldiers watching below. Every wolf instinctively stiffened. Her golden eyes swept across them all. "You followed him because you were taught fear was law." No one moved. "You were taught rank mattered more than worth." The wind howled across the mountain. "You were taught some wolves exist only to obey and suffer." Several omegas among the crowd slowly lifted their heads. Lyra's voice deepened. "That ends tonight." The words echoed across Ironfang like prophecy. Garrick rose shakily behind her. "You think they'll follow you?" Lira looked back at him once. "No." Then she glanced across the fortress. "I think they'll finally choose for themselves." The king's expression twisted with fury. "You naive fool." He lunged suddenly with a hidden dagger. But before the blade reached her, Fenrir appeared. The first wolf moved faster than sight. Massive jaws closed around Garrick Thorne instantly. The king froze. The entire fortress froze. Fenrir's golden eyes locked onto the ruler of Ironfang. Ancient. Cold. Judging. For one endless moment, nobody moved. Then Fenrir released him. Garrick collapsed backward in terror. The first wolf stepped between Lira and the fallen king. And spoke, not through minds this time. Aloud. His voice rolled across the mountain like thunder. "The old kingdoms are finished." Every wolf present felt the words in their bones. Fenrir looked toward the crowd below. "Choose carefully what replaces them." Then the ancient wolf turned away from the king entirely. The dismissal hurt Garrick more than death would have. Because for the first time in his life, no one feared him anymore. The soldiers lowered their weapons slowly. One by one. Across the fortress. Not because they served Lira. Not because they served Fenrir. Because the illusion holding Ironfang together had finally shattered. And nobody knew how to rebuild it. Hours later, the storm finally began to fade. Fires still burned throughout parts of the fortress, but the fighting had ended. No victory celebration came. No triumphant coronation. Only silence. Lira stood alone near the mountain cliffs watching dawn slowly rise beyond the northern forests. The air smelled different now. Cleaner somehow. Behind her, Fenrir approached quietly. "You spared him." Lira kept watching the horizon. "Yes. You changed history tonight." A faint smile crossed her face. Hopefully for the better. Fenrir stood beside her. For the first time since meeting him, the ancient wolf looked almost peaceful. "The first bloodline once ruled through power," he said. "And lost everything because of it." Lira glanced toward him. "I'm not interested in ruling anyone." "Good." He looked toward the waking horizon. "Then perhaps your kind finally learned." Below them, Ironfang slowly awakened into a new reality. Servants walked openly through halls once controlled by fear. Soldiers removed royal banners from the walls. The throne room remained empty. And somewhere inside the broken fortress, Garrick Thorne sat alone without a kingdom terrifying enough to protect him anymore. Lira inhaled deeply. The mountain wind no longer felt like a prison. For the first time in her life, the future belonged to her. Not to kings. Not to ranks. Not to fear. To her. Fenrir looked toward the rising sun. "Where will you go now?" Lira smiled faintly. Then turned toward the endless northern horizon. Somewhere no wolf ever has before.